Gosh. Well, are you ready for the altar call? Courtney's given us a nice sermon there. I don't know what I could add to that. Gosh. That was good. She's talking about what we do in this world. And a big part of it is loving and caring for the widow, the orphan, the immigrant among us. And how do we do that? I mean, that's part of our purpose on this earth. Part of our reason for existing is to care for people and to restore order and redeem those things which are broken in this world. And we do that through wisdom. Wisdom is God's gift to us to help us to know how to do those things. And that's actually what we're going to talk about today. I didn't know she was going to be telling us about, part of our message here, but that's what we're going to talk about, wisdom in the book of James. So I think David alluded to it, and I don't know if you all heard about this. I mean, I suppose most of you did, but we had an election this past week. You're all aware of that, right? Okay. Now at Life Church, and David said this, we're a nonpartisan body. We don't pick sides. We don't say these are the right people and these are the wrong people. Partly because we believe that the government can never replace what the church does. We all have different attitudes about the role of government in our lives, but none of us can have a different attitude about our responsibility in this world and the things we should be doing in this world. And they were the things Courtney alluded to and so many more. So that's why we don't take sides. We want to take the side of God and be serving God and serving this world as if the government didn't care. Whether they do or not, we're going to act like they don't care, and we're going to go ahead and do what God wants us to do. So it doesn't take away our responsibilities or our mission in this world. And as I was reading, all the social media stuff and the news after the election, we just sang that song, It Is Well With My Soul. And I couldn't help as we were singing that thinking, how many people probably don't feel that right at the moment? They're still feeling the after effects, perhaps depression, perhaps anger, frustration, many different feelings associated with that. And, Paul gives us a special word of wisdom on how we deal with people's emotions. And it's in Romans chapter 12, and he writes this, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud. Do not be conceited." Paul tells us to mourn alongside those who mourn. For some of us, that's easy, but for others, it's going to require a bit of a sacrifice to mourn with those who mourn. But regardless of how we feel, his admonishment stands to all of us. And if we feel like we're, on the winning side, we're feeling good about ourselves, Paul says, don't be proud. Don't be conceited about that. We are here to love and care for one another, regardless of where we stand. And that means listening, watching, observing one another, and forming bonds of connection with one another, and not dismissing one another's feelings. All right. So going on, I don't think that me standing up here can take away your feelings, and I wouldn't want to do that. And I wouldn't want to try to rush you through the feelings you do have. But there are some very practical things we can do, and again, Courtney was alluding to that. A lot of times when we feel a sense of mourning or depression, it's because we have this sense of hopelessness, a sense that I can't change things, or that people don't see me, they don't see how I'm feeling. And if you're feeling that in this time, I would encourage you, as you work through those various feelings, that you begin to turn your eyes outward and you say to yourself, if my heart has really been broken for the immigrants, what can I do for the immigrants who are friends and neighbors? And we have a great organization in Columbus called CRIS, the Community Refugee and Immigration Service. It's a great opportunity to get out there and be on the front line of helping people who are newcomers to American society. Maybe you're someone who feels especially deeply for women and the challenges that they're facing. And we have an organization, here right based in our church. Steph Kreider leads it. It's our Value Life ministry. It's an opportunity to help women who are going through troubled pregnancies or struggling through a pregnancy and struggling to meet their needs and what decisions should I make with this. So her ministry they provide for these women. There are other opportunities in our community. I just want to highlight for you, Life to Sea Bus, for the poor in our community. Wherever your heart breaks, I just encourage you, step in, make a difference, be part of the solution, be the church. That's what the church is. Be the church, be the difference. I don't say that in a cliche way. I say that in a heartfelt, that's how we change our lives. That's how we change the world around us. Amen. Now, I think this whole idea coming out of the election, I was struck, listening to commentators and stuff, even on election night. I ignored most of it, for months and months. I pretty much ignored this whole thing because I don't want to get caught up in it. But I did take a little bit of time election night to listen to the commentators and hear what they were saying. And they were throwing out, their words of wisdom, all right? Here's some of the words of wisdom that I heard both on election night and just after the election the next day or two. What happens, happens. And these are real things that people said, okay? I'm not going to give you the names, but these are real things people have said. What happens, happens, and we need to be gracious and magnanimous. Someone else said, stay mad. Someone else said, Donald Trump is my president, and he's your president too. Someone said, know that you're not alone when election results don't align with your hopes. Someone said, engage in happy, healthy distractions. I'll leave it to your imagination what that might be. Take a break from the news. America has spoken. Get over it. Remember, you have allies. Don't despair. Take the long view. Don't be surprised by evil. People vote based on their needs, so quit criticizing them. End of story. Don't lose hope. Now, I'm sure you've heard things like that. Maybe you've said some of those things yourselves. My question to you is there any wisdom in any of that? How do we know what is wise and what is not wise? What advice is good and what advice is not so good? Well, fortunately, the Bible has some guidance for us, and we're going to look at that today, and we'll be spending most of our time in James chapter 3. So if you want to turn to James chapter 3, you can do that as I share another biblical verse with you. There's a well-known verse in the Bible in the book of Proverbs, and it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now, the phrase fear of the Lord means reverential awe and submission to God. It does not mean I'm terrified, he's going to kill me or something. It's not that kind of a fear. It's a fear where we're showing reverence to God. We are showing awe and deference to God. We trust him and we obey him in our life. So this attitude of reverence, trust, and submission is the prerequisite to finding wisdom. Well, how does that work? What exactly does that mean? What do we mean by the word wisdom? Well, wisdom is that body of knowledge combined with practice that enables us to live a meaningful, fruitful, and joyful life by living as God intended. By living as God intended. What does it mean to live as God intended? Can we even know how God intended us to live? Well, most, if not all, cultures have some kind of respect for wisdom. Most, if not all, cultures recognize that the world works a certain way. Life goes a certain way, and if you stay in harmony with the way things work in this world, then you're going to be happier. You're going to be more fruitful in your life. Let me give you some examples. So regarding wealth, and these are all taken out of the book of Proverbs. Regarding wealth, it says, a generous man will prosper, and he who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. We've seen that true in a lot of lives. How about regarding work? Lazy hands make a man poor, but diligent hands bring wealth. Well, most of the time that works out pretty well. How about the tongue? Reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Regarding justice, it says, he who oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honors God. So wisdom, once again, it's that body of knowledge combined with practice that enables us to live a meaningful, fruitful, joyful life by living as God intended. Wisdom always assumes that the world works a certain way, and biblical wisdom specifically assumes that God created the world a certain way. He created us to live a certain way in this world. So what way is that? What's the answer to that question? Well, it goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 1. And if you know me, you know at some point in the process, I'm going to get to Genesis chapter 1. Right. Because, that's just like the foundation of everything, all right? Genesis chapter 1, starting in verse 26, it says, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all creatures that move along the ground.' So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, 'Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves along the ground.'" So God created us, all of us, in his image, and he created us for the purpose of ruling over creation and subduing it. What does that mean? We need to fine-tune this a little bit so that we have a good understanding going forward. To be in his image means that we reflect his character and his ways. It's like being an ambassador. When an ambassador comes to your nation, they reflect the entire nation. They represent everybody. And how they behave is an illustration to you of what his people are like. So when we walk around and interact with people, every single one of us is an illustration of what God is like, or that's what we're supposed to be. That's what our life should be like. We are in the image of God. To rule over means we're responsible for caring for people and things in such a way that everything flourishes. So ruling is not, I'm the boss, I'm in charge, you do what I want. That's not what ruling is. Ruling is, I am the one responsible for taking care of things and ensuring that everything goes well, that everything flourishes in its own way. And you don't have to be like me. You don't have to be like me. I don't have to be like you. We flourish in our own way, in the way God created each one of us. It's like when, it's sort of like when you drop your kids off over there in kids' church, you expect that the people there are going to treat your kids like you would, right? At least the best of you. The best side of you. When you go and pick them up, you don't expect them crying, smothered with feces, or anything like that, right? Hey, that can happen. If you ever worked in the nursery, you know what can happen. But isn't that right? You expect that, okay? So you expect the best. And that's what God expects from us, is that we would give people our best and care for them as if God himself were caring for them. That's what it means to rule over. And then subdue means to subdue the darkness and the chaos in this world, to bring order and beauty to what is here and to this broken world. So biblical wisdom assumes that we were designed to care for creation, make it fruitful, and bring order and beauty out of chaos. Everyone should benefit from our stewardship. So God gives us wisdom to help us do this. We need God's wisdom in order to know how to do that well. Therefore, how do we apply this? So that's wisdom, okay? That's what we're talking about with wisdom. How do we apply this wisdom to the things around us? Well, fortunately, James gives us a little dichotomy. He says, okay, this is what worldly wisdom is like, and this is what godly wisdom is like. So we're going to go now to James chapter 3, and we're going to start in verse 13. And see how he describes the difference between the two. So starting in verse 13, it says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." This is the dark side of wisdom. This is the worldly side of wisdom. I want you to consider 3 words here in this passage. Harbor. To harbor is to make a safe place for, to create an environment where something can flourish. Bitter envy, that's a lust for what is not ours. We want it just because we want it, even though it's not ours. And then selfish ambition, the Greek word actually means a partisan spirit, partisanship, strife. So taken together, we can conclude that worldly wisdom creates an environment where envy, partisanship, and strife can flourish. Now think about what you've just gone through in this past election season. Would you say it's characterized by creating an environment where envy, strife, partisanship can flourish? I would say so. And I would say anything, any words, any attitudes that encourage that is worldly wisdom, is drawn from that. It's contrary to the natural order of what God established, where love, peace, and fruitfulness flourish instead. So let's use that as a measuring stick against some of the sayings, some of the advice we saw earlier that I read to you. One of them said, stay mad. Well, I guess it depends on what you're mad at. If you're mad at evil, then, that's a good thing. But if you're mad at people, we need to check ourselves. We need to be careful about what we're mad at. Someone said, Donald Trump is my president and you're president too. Well, it seems like that one kind of suppresses people's feelings. It tells them that your feelings are not important, therefore you're not important. So I would call that worldly wisdom. And it promotes strife between people. How about engage in happy, and I want to say something here too. That's a true statement. Donald Trump is my president and your president. Just because it's true does not mean it's wise. Just because it's true does not mean it's wise. We feel comfortable in saying things that are true because we can defend it. Sometimes we're flippant about saying things that are true. But truth does not always bond people together. It does not always join our hearts together. And our goal is to love and care for one another and help one another flourish. Now, truth is an enabler. Truth is helpful toward that end. A lot of times we believe lies, and we need to be disowned of lies. But truth by itself is not wisdom. All right, engage in happy, healthy distractions. Well, that's probably okay, especially at first. But you don't want to live in the world of distractions. So eventually you have to come back and re-engage. So that's kind of a mixed one there. How about America has spoken? Get over it. No, definitely. Once again, I suppress your feelings. I tell you it doesn't matter. Get over it. Worldly wisdom. Remember, you have allies. Well, it depends. That could unite people. It makes us feel bonded to certain people. But what if we use that phrase to draw partisan lines? You have allies and you have enemies. Find your allies so you can go to battle against your enemies. Then we're pulling in a partisan spirit there. So we need to be careful about how we think about these things. A lot of it's not the words. A lot of it is the heart attitude, what we're drawing on there. People vote based on their needs. So quit criticizing them. End of story. Now, once again, we're slamming the door in the face of people's feelings. But more importantly, it's not just about us and what's good for us. I vote my interests, but I need to be thinking about everybody in this world. Once again, my responsibility as a human being is as a caretaker in this world. And that means I need to be thinking about other people and not just about myself. Finally, take the long view. Well, that sounds good because it calls us to let the emotions settle so that we have time for a clearer mind, clear emotions to deal with the world. All right, so in general, worldly wisdom divides people. It causes us to obscure the image of God in other people. It makes it easy for us to despise and hurt other people. It causes us to elevate ourselves above other people, leading to injustice. It encourages us to take what we want at almost any cost. So does that make sense? Do you understand the distinction and how James is presenting this? He's calling those types of things, those types of attitudes, worldly wisdom because they do not align with the way God created, with the way God intended us to live our lives. Now, let's turn and talk about the other form of wisdom, godly wisdom. So we're going to pick up again. We'll go back to verse 13, and I'll just read the whole passage again. So who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good deeds, by their good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder in every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. Well, the first thing I want to highlight is verse 3. Let them show it by their good life. In other words, wisdom isn't something you just stuff away up here and that you know. It's evident in the way you live your life. Your heart comes to the surface in the way you live. And wisdom will always come to the surface, the wisdom that you live by. All right, we're going to go through the list of words that James used here, and I want to explain each of the words just so that we're very clear. These are the things that are evidence of wisdom in your life. This is what wisdom looks like in practice. Deeds done in humility. There's that dirty word, humility. At least in terms of worldly wisdom. But the word means to be reverent, humility that is, means to be reverent and deferential to God. And since humans represent the image of God, we're also reverent and deferential towards one another because you were created in the image of God, you were created in the image of God, I was created in the image of God, and so we look upon one another with reverence. There's almost 24 times where Paul admonishes the followers of Christ to treat one another this way or that way. We honor one another, we care for one another, we accept one another, we serve one another, we show patience for one another, we submit to one another, we consider one another better than ourselves, among other things. I'd encourage you to read through the letters of Paul and highlight all these one another's, how we treat one another. Jesus in his parable in the sheep of the goats in Matthew 25 said, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." What you're doing to one another is how you're treating God himself and Jesus himself. Wisdom manifests itself when through our deeds, reverence and deference to God and to other people. Okay, humility. Number 2, pure. The word is often misunderstood in English. In the original Greek, it means clear of impurities or singularly focused. It means we are following God's ways without competing affections for our time, energy, and our heart, our affection. James is likely reflecting on Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where he said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 8, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." In other words, if you're singularly focused on following God, you shall find him. That's the promise there. Third word, peace-loving, peaceable. Godly wisdom makes us peacemakers because we love people. Once again, he's drawing from the Sermon on the Mount. "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." In this letter, James talks a lot about strife. In fact, the verses leading up to verse 13 is all about the tongue and about how we create strife amongst one another. And so it's a consequence of seeking worldly wisdom because strife comes from self-seeking. It comes from serving our own needs instead of considering the needs of other people. Our will is in conflict with someone else's will, and that creates strife. Seeking peace is about seeking what's good for all parties, for all people affected. It's also about reconciliation. Paul calls us ministers of reconciliation. One of the goals of every human interaction should be reconciliation, or at least taking a step toward being reconciled with other people. That's what makes us a peacemaker, because we seek the reconciliation with one another, and that makes us peace-loving people. Next word, considerate. The word here means fair-minded, to consider all viewpoints. That's what it means to be considerate. It's in contrast to being unfair and unreasonable. This goes back to Solomon, where the goal of wisdom is to do what is right, what is just, and what is fair. Let's be clear. Fair does not mean, sorry kids, that I get the same amount of ice cream as everybody else. Fair doesn't mean that we all get a big box, or we all get, a box big enough to see over the fence. Many of us have co-opted the word fair to mean different things. Fair means that I am willing to sit back and listen to every viewpoint before making a decision. Okay? There's a certain perseverance, a certain patience involved in that. We want to weigh the merit of all the viewpoints and consider the long-term consequences to the relational well-being that will be impacted by whatever decision we're making. That's what it means to be considerate. The next word is submissive. Another one of those words everybody loves, right? We all want to be submissive. But what does it really mean? Submissive means I'm willing to yield. In other words, I'm not stubborn. I'm not unbending. I'm not rigid in my attitudes. I'm willing. It does not mean to be trampled underfoot by other people either. Don't get me wrong there. But it means that I don't operate with unyielding preconceptions. I am willing to yield. If I'm considering all viewpoints, it does no good if I'm not willing to change my mind, right? So a willingness in my heart from the beginning to yield, that's submissive. How about full of mercy? Well, sometimes in our society, mercy also gets a bad rap because it seems like we're letting people get off the hook instead of giving them their just punishment. Mercy sounds like we're not taking their deeds seriously. Sounds like we're not honoring the suffering of victims. Well, that's not at all what mercy means in the Bible. Mercy is a compassionate act of kindness and goodness towards those in need, especially when it's not deserved. Especially when it's not deserved. It's a core part of God's character, and it needs to be a core part of our character. Now, mercy takes into consideration the full depth of what someone has done wrong. It does not ignore that. But after taking in the full depth, it says, you know what? I'm human. I've made a lot of mistakes too. I choose to offer mercy to you despite that. God chose to love us despite everything that we've done in our lives, either out of ignorance or intentionally. Mercy. Blessed are the merciful, once again reflecting on Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. The converse of that is if you don't show mercy, God will not show mercy to you. And Jesus has some teachings about that. Those are hard teachings, but it's true. Show mercy. Good fruit. The output of my life should give life, joy, and nourishment to other people. It's not a life lived for my own benefit. It's a life lived to benefit other people and to share freely and generously with other people. How about impartial? This goes along with being considerate and submissive. It's the same kind of idea. It completes the trifecta around fairness. We want to be fair-minded, and that means being impartial with sides. We're not swayed because they're my friend. We're not swayed by the rich or by the poor. We just look for what's best for everybody involved, to be impartial. And finally, James says godly wisdom is evidenced by sincerity. The word sincerity is actually a play on hypocrisy. It's on hypocrisy and hypocrisy. In other words, it's the opposite of being a hypocrite. What's on the outside is what's on the inside. We don't hide our sadness. We don't hide our joy. We allow those things to come forward. Now, imagine living in a world where all your feelings are out there on the surface. Anyone want to live in that world? But wouldn't that be a motivation to have God and plead with God to change our hearts and to allow our hearts to be changed so we're not ashamed to be sincere with other people? Sincerity. So in summary, I want to reiterate, all these words have to do with relationship. Have you noticed that? Every evidence of wisdom has to do with being in good relationship with people. And isn't that what our purpose is in this world? To care for people, to care for creation, to bring out the fruitfulness in people's lives, to take that responsibility on ourselves. Wisdom is what helps us to do that. There's nothing here about being healthy and wealthy. There's nothing here about being smart. There's nothing about being efficient. There's nothing about gaining power. That's not what wisdom is about. There's nothing about avoiding pain. That's a hard one too. It's all about how can we better love and care for the world and the people around us. That's wisdom. Now I know that our world is a broken mess. And we can't go through a week, a season like this in American life without recognizing that our world is a mess. We feel the sting of hatred all around. We feel the veil of disappointment that smothers some of us. Our victories are hollow because on the one hand, some people we love and care about are happy, some are sad, and we're kind of stuck in the middle. We don't know how to make it right for everybody. There are no real winners and losers in heaven. God's kingdom is not about winning and losing. God's kingdom is about making it right for everybody. It's about lifting and elevating everybody, especially the vulnerable among us. It's about stepping into our responsibility and accepting the responsibility that this world is mine to care for. It's not the government. It's not my favorite whoever. It's not my place to just go around living and making myself happy. I've got to take responsibility for something beyond myself. And wisdom is the thing that leads us there and takes us there. But it requires self-sacrifice too. It requires a willingness to give up something so that I can go beyond ourselves. And in our society, it's very tempting just to make our life good and make our life happy. It's very tempting to focus on people like me and not like people like them. You know what? We can't do that. We can't do that and be God's people. We can do that, but we're fools if we do. This world is for all of us. All of us have a part to play. All of us have a role to play. And we need God's wisdom. Where are you going to get that wisdom? Where are you going to get it? Well, the Bible. The Bible is obviously a great source for finding that wisdom. Reading books like Proverbs and what have you. But what you're looking for as you read through is you're looking for passages where you see people coming together and flourishing. Okay? When you see that, highlight it. If you see something going on in the scripture and somebody's life is really screwed over by it, that's a red X. Okay, don't do that. And the Bible's honest. It tells it like it is. It shows the good stories and the awful stories. Find the good ones and mimic those behaviors. Put yourself in community. Community is really important. You know, I said it's not just what we think, what we know, it's what we practice. Wisdom is about practicing. Well, if you want to practice relationships, you better get in relationships. You need people in your lives. And I tell you, there's nothing that'll bring the ugliness in your heart to the surface faster than a bunch of people hanging around you. Right? But you need that. You need something to rub off the rough edges. We do that in community. We exercise grace and mercy toward one another. Finally, and I don't speak this because I'm an old man, but learn from your elders. Wisdom always, here's the raw fact. Older people have just had more time, okay? We've had more time to experience more things, make a heck of a lot more mistakes. We don't always learn from them, so not all your elders are, all wise and smart. But you know what? The Bible encourages us to turn to our elders and learn from them. Ask them about life. How did you get through this? Don't waste the resources in this room and the resources God has put in your life. Take time to learn from them. No matter where you are on the journey to life, now is the time to begin seeking God's wisdom. We're going to take time now for communion. We sang a song earlier called So Will I. And one of the challenges in that song is, if you gave your life for them, so will I. The communion represents Jesus giving his life for us, that we might be in good relationship with God and with one another. And so we are called to also sacrifice on behalf of other people. And as you take communion, I just want you to give thanks to Jesus for his sacrifice and ask him to give you a heart that's soft, tender, malleable, peace-loving as you go through your life with other people. So let's take communion now as the band plays for us. Right here in the back and right here on this side. Just come across the front. Mentioned at the beginning, I know that song might be difficult for some people to sing right now. And I just would say, if that's you, if you're having a hard time sensing the presence of God and the comfort of God in your life and the leading of God and just even knowing what to do in this season, I'd ask you to come forward and let someone pray for you. Also, if you're one who has never really thought about you had a purpose, that God created you for a reason. You know, if that's you, you've just been kind of confused and just kind of wandering through life, I'd like you to come forward as well for prayer. Let someone pray for you that the Holy Spirit would bring clarity in your heart. And I'm not here to tell you exactly what role you're going to play in this mission, in this world, but every one of you has a place in caring for the world around you and the circle around you, every one of you. And if you have not sensed that or not even realized that, I pray that you would come and allow the Holy Spirit to speak to you, allow someone to pray for you. If there's anything else you'd like prayer for, please come forward. Otherwise, I just bless you on this rainy day. May you be at peace. Have a good weekend.